Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the July 24th meeting of the Port Washington Board of Education's Budget and Facilities Committee. Today we have a pretty full agenda. We actually have guests here today who are going to present on some plans that we have for the Guggenheim Preserve. After that, we're going to talk about the foundation aid increase that we recently found out we're going to be receiving from New York State. We're going to continue talking about the Capital Reserve Fund, I think we're going to very, very briefly skip over the 5-year facility plan, the playgrounds, transportation, and use of facilities, so that we can go into our key new business item, which is the preliminary budget forecast. So, and as part of that, we're going to talk about the state budget runs, at which point we'll jump to community comments. So we have quite a bit to talk about today. So I'm going to pass it over to Mrs. Class from, or Ms. Class, I'm sorry, from Residents Forward to talk about the Guggenheim Preserve. If you could share your screen, go ahead.
Thank you, Adam, and good morning, everyone. Okay, so we're going to get started on our presentation on the Guggenheim Discovery Preserve project. We'd like to encourage you to ask questions as we go and provide feedback. So let's get started. You'll not only hear from me, but also from Lynn Capuano and Kim Kaiserman. So Residents Forward has a long history of doing projects that benefit the students of the school district. And so most recently, our Unity and Diversity mural up on Campus Drive, our ongoing climate awareness garden program, our elementary education programs. And so this new initiative with our project partners, PW Green, Lydig House, Transition Town, the school district, and the National Park Service is by far our most collaborative project ever. The Guggenheim Preserve, as we know, is one of the last public open spaces on Long Island. It's a 17-acre natural space owned and managed by the school district. So we have come together and worked on a strategic plan and have collaborated with school administrators and our partners to come up with our shared vision for the space, which is, I will just read it to you. The Guggenheim Discovery Preserve is an outdoor space where nature can inspire everyone to comfortably engage in discovery, problem solving, and community building in an ever-changing world. It was really a fun moment when we all got together and came up with this vision together, and we're excited to share it with you. And you can see these photos. We've been using the preserve to have events already, so it's been super fun. And now I'd like to introduce Lynn Capuano.
Thanks, Trish, and good morning, everybody. So we just wanted to acknowledge how much time and effort went into developing the district's vision, mission, and core values. And we absolutely took our direction from these guiding documents to formulate not only our vision, but also our goals. Next one. So we have 3 goals, as you can see here. They are education, stewardship, and accessibility. We see each of them as having direct, clear connections to the district's vision, mission, and core values. And we've highlighted some of those connections here, although there certainly are more. These are just some samples. So each of our goals is mutually supportive of and supported by the other goals. And we see them all as collectively supporting the vision, mission, and core values of the district as well. So on the next slides, you'll see there's a lot of information, and we intentionally included it so you could have it for reference after today's presentation. As Trish mentioned, we're in the process of writing our strategic plan. The bullets here are pulled from the list of tasks that we've outlined for working towards each of our goals and ultimately the vision over the next 2 to 3 years. So with respect to education, we're focused on breaking down barriers that are keeping educators from using the space with their students. With respect to stewardship, in the stewardship arena, we will be compiling a formal plant management plan to address the species that are negatively affecting biodiversity in the preserve. And we'll be raising funds to implement that plan in coordination with the school district and the board. Our stewardship efforts, we think, will enhance the overall environmental health of the preserve, as well as provide extensive education opportunities. Accessibility is a key feature for us, as it is for the district. Again, it's about breaking down barriers to experiencing nature. And we're partnering with organizations in Port Washington, such as the Nicholas Center, the library, the school district, the Helen Keller National Center. And we're also taking inspiration from the recently opened Autism Nature Trail in Western New York, which has become a broadly popular trail and is also being integrated into the local school district's curriculum. And as we move into phase 2, we think it's important to nourish our commitment to this project and those of our partners so that we can continue to move forward. So in order to do that, we want to realize the objectives for the design and use of the preserve that we've outlined here. I'll give you a moment to take a look at those. And then I'm going to turn it over to Kim, who's going to explain what we're doing to transition to and realize phase 2.
Good morning, everyone. So as you've heard from Trish and Lynn, this project is an incredibly ambitious one. The preserve itself is a really unique and amazing space that we have in our community. And there's a tremendous amount of potential for the community and for the students of the Port Washington School District. So in keeping with that potential and with the ambitiousness of our plans, we've funded a grant writer. We're pursuing county, state, federal, and private funding. We're planning a number of community fundraising efforts with different groups and working to build support and excitement within the community. And in particular, I just want to highlight the work that we're doing to identify grants that are appropriate for this project and pursue them. We'll be pursuing 7 or 8 grants over the next several months. So we think this is a really exciting effort and something that we would like more of the community to be aware of. So we hope that you'll help us in spreading the word about the work that we're doing and the potential that this project holds for the whole community and especially for the children of the district.
Does anyone have any questions for us?
So we're going to go, we usually use the hand raise function on Zoom here. So if you want, I'll call people out and they can ask the question. It looks like Ms. Epstein has her hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and thank you, everyone from Residents Forward for that presentation. It's exactly what we've been looking for, I think, to this point where we've asked for what your long-term vision of it, and it's nice to see the partnership with our vision, mission, and portrait of a graduate. So thank you. One of the questions I still have outstanding is how much does this cost? And I know that you said you're developing a budget and you're about to apply for grants and you're employing a grant fund, a grant writer. It's been my experience when you're doing these types of projects, though, you do have some sort of cursory budget planned out so you know what your goal is. And then furthermore, what are your financial expectations long-term from that total budget of the school district, including staffing?
So it really is all unfolding as we still are in our planning phase, and we're happy to get a really firmed up budget over to you. I don't want to speculate and throw out numbers necessarily in this forum, but thank you for letting us know that that's something that you'd like to see at this time, and we can get that together for you.
Thank you.
Dr. Block, go ahead.
Can you tell us a little bit about the utilization within the school district in the last 2 to 3 years?
Did you mean with the classes coming out to use the preserve? Yes. And so PW Green, and we're lucky to have Lynn Johnson with us from PW Green. He's been involved with the environmental education programs at the preserve for, longer than the past 2 years. Lynn, did you want to say a few words about that?
Yes, this is the question was about the students.
About the students coming out to learn in the
Oh,
preserve.
yes.
Yeah.
We and PW Green has been taking the children out in mostly from Guggenheim School, and in the beginning there was daily and perhaps 1 or 2 others, but it's been primarily the children from Guggenheim. We've been taking them out since about 2003 or 4, and as we've done spring field trips and fall field trips, each of them focused on what you're finding in the preserve at those times. In the spring, it's the foliage is coming out. You're able to identify the trees and the other plants there. In the fall, it's we do classes on decomposition and also seeds and fruit from the various plants and what they're used for. That's it in a nutshell. We've estimated the number of children that have come out into the field the number is in the thousands from the last.
And we're not always involved when the teachers are bringing the classes out. So there's some of those numbers that we're not necessarily aware of.
Yes, we've had a good working relationship with the facilities department for all these years, Jim Rostano and his predecessor also. The teachers are, particularly from Guggenheim, are aware of our efforts and we know most of them personally. My wife was a teacher there actually, so that helps a lot too.
Great.
Any other
Adam, did you?
questions?
Adam,
Yeah,
did you have a
let
follow-up?
me just
Yeah,
follow
go ahead.
up. I sort of had a sense of what you probably did during the trips, but I don't really think I have much of a better sense of like how many classes from Guggenheim per year would you say go out into the fields? And
I
then
don't
how
think,
many from
I don't think Lynn
daily
would
or
have
other
that.
schools?
Yeah, I don't think Lynn would have that, but we can check with Kim Licato and see if we can get that information from her.
Even
We
just an
wouldn't have
estimate,
been-
because if it's 1 class per year, that is very different than if it's 15 classes per year. And
Well,
Okay,
I don't
so
know which.
Sure.
Yeah, Adam, Dr. Licato takes all the classes herself on different days through the whole year through there.
But
Okay.
So I
can I
think
just,
almost every class goes through there.
right, but I don't think it's
Yeah.
all necessary. I mean, classes were doing that before this project is what I think, what they're
Yeah.
trying to tell you also, that this is really
Yeah.
not in line with this particular project, which is a different story. Sorry,
Emily,
I chimed in.
you had a
I
question,
did.
Emily?
I did.
Yeah.
So I want to
But
thank
to
everybody.
answer your question, Adam, I know that Guggenheim uses it, at least every class goes through once in the year.
And it's been happening for years. I mean, I have college age and a high school senior, and my kids were brought over there from Daly, so it's been going on for many, many years. So it would be a great number to have, but I don't know exactly what the count is.
So I actually have a couple of questions. So thank you for coming, and I appreciate the work that you've done so far. My question is, I always try to bring it back to what can the board do? How does this help with, what can the board do for you, or so we have a understanding, an agreement that, you, Residents Forward and PW Green, I believe, would be cultivating the land and making it an educational space. You said that you still are working on your strategic plan. So, right, if I understood that correctly. So my question to you is, who's involved from our school district? Because this is property that belongs to the school district, and theoretically the school district tomorrow could decide or that, you know, we want to do something else with it. So who is working with you to get the strategic plan going, or when is it being finalized? Because I know this has been going on now for a couple of years, these discussions, and questioning, you know, what are the next steps? What do you need from us, I guess?
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Emily, for bringing that up. And of course, we've had the pleasure of working with Kathleen O'Hara since she took over for Mary, and it's just been wonderful. We also have Kim Licato, Meg Sheehan, we have Matt DiCarlo, all from Guggenheim. I understand Matt's going to be continuing on in the district as well.
He's taking over for Sherry Suzanne.
I wasn't sure if I could say that or not in the meeting.
No,
Okay,
he's
good.
taking over for Sherry in the interim.
Yes. Yeah, we're so thrilled for him. He's been such a great partner, and we're excited to have his connection through Daily now as well. We would love more involvement. Actually, we feel like it would only help if we could have maybe a Board of Ed member on our steering committee. I know that you guys have a ton going on, but that would be really helpful. And, you know, we're making inroads to the other elementary schools. We have connections at Weber, but it's really hard because the teachers are busy during the day when we're holding our meetings. But we decided to start reaching out to some retired teachers as well.
So Trish, I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt. Let me interrupt you there. So what do you need from our teachers? Because one of the goals that we as a district have is to be more consistent amongst all our schools and have more of an inclusiveness in all our schools. So it does concern me that only Guggenheim and Daly are accessing this property when and Lynn is saying no. So
yeah.
What do you need from us? I know that, so again, us as a board, we're responsible for the budgetary aspect of the school district, right? In that sense. So I know that you've been working with Kathy, and she's been putting aside, you know, she's put aside some funds for planning going into the next year's budget. But is that, what does that entail, I guess? But the question is, how does the board get involved or not get involved, or what do we need to do? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm going to let Lynn, because I feel like Lynn maybe wanted to say something. Oh, okay. Okay. I mean, this is a collaborative project, and we want input from as many people as possible. We want to create a space that's going to be utilized by all of the teachers and even the administrators in the district. So it's about, you know, coming to our meetings and sharing your thoughts and giving us feedback. I mean, that's what we really love, and that's what we're really craving at this point. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah. So Emily, to go back to your question, the kind of the genesis of this invite to this meeting was the request for the letter of support for the grant. And we were looking to just get a brief presentation and an update so that this committee could make a recommendation to the greater board about whether or not we were prepared to write that letter of support. So I just want to be very clear that, you know, that letter of support has no impact or I guess like legal implication on the MOU or anything like that. It would just be the board giving that letter of support specifically for that grant. And, you know, being that we are, you know, short on time, I think we did hit the 20 minutes now. Emily, I would like to ask the committee if they want to make that recommendation so that we could make it to the board. Is everyone okay with that? Julie, did you have something on that subject? I see you raising your hand.
I was just going to say, I don't even know what I know the grant is a financial ask. So is that correct? Okay, so it's a financial ask. So what specific, you just want us to say we support this? I don't know if the board hasn't seen the grant. I'm assuming Ms. O'Hara's office has seen the grant. Someone has said that, you know, again, to your question, right? We're not putting ourselves in a precarious situation. I'm assuming all of those things have been checked, but I'd like to ask that those things have been checked before the board lends their support, since we're dealing in abstracts at this point.
So if you'd like to see the grant, we're happy to forward that to you as soon as we jump off this meeting.
Yeah, and my understanding, let me know if I'm correct, is that as you're submitting to the National Park Service for a grant for funding Is that correct?
No, so we already have a grant from the National Park Service Rivers and Trails Conservation Assistance. That's been going on since 2020, and that's a technical assistance grant. And so we have a team of 3 plus a landscape architect that's been working with us at no cost. What we're applying for now is actual funding through the Long Island Sound Stewardship Fund. Because the project is in the Long Island Sound watershed, we found out that we qualify for these types of grants. And we were actually contacted by folks at the DEC, and they kind of told us about the grant and suggested that we apply. We're also going to be applying through Nassau County Water and Soil District for funding. The Green Tree Good Neighbor Fund in Manhasset. I'm forgetting the list. We have a long list of grants, but we can send all of them to you so you guys can really dig in and take a look if that would help.
And the bottom line is you basically need a letter from the school district saying that we support the project in order for you to get these grants.
And back when we applied for that grant in 2020 with the National Park Service, the superintendent sent a letter, and I'm happy to forward that to you guys as an example of what we needed. It's a super brief letter just saying that you support the project.
Yeah.
We have it, Trish. That
Okay,
we have
great.
it. I think that's
Okay, great.
So,
Can I just add something? I just think our question was, we know that you've put in a lot of work, and we know that you've put in a lot of time. I think one of the questions that we have is, again, a new group of board members, even to understand the project. So thank you for coming and explaining. As you know, we've got new board members, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page as far as what the project is. I think we also just want to make sure that the residents, and again, we're all in the same community, so we're all basically part of residents, right? You're not going ahead and doing fundraising or getting grants or monetary commitments that aren't okay with everybody. So because I understand it's a lot of work to go and get the grants. It's a lot of work to we've put in resources already. About using this property. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and we're not all going at least as for on your part, going and getting grants that down the line somebody might be questioning and saying, where is it? I just have another question. The memorandum of understanding has not been signed yet, right? We're still waiting. We have a meeting tomorrow. I'm hoping that I have it.
Yeah, so it got signed, and I hand delivered it to Kathy last week. So
perfect. So I'll be signing.
We're just about there.
So I'll sign it tomorrow. Okay, great. I just want, because we have a meeting tomorrow night. So I just want to make sure we have it all in place. Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Block, go ahead.
So in general, I support the development, and I'm going to support this. However, I do have concerns that you've come to this meeting and we asked you how much it was going to cost and how many people are going to use it, and you didn't know the answers to those. So it is my expectation that going forward, when you're preparing for a meeting like this, you're going to have those numbers, because I promise you I know that we have asked you in the past, and I am confident that we're going to ask you again.
Great. So, just kind of seconding a little bit what Adam said. I think that from a board, like, at least for me personally, it sounds like a really exciting project, but I think, like, from a board standpoint, our questions really have to be, what does this look like for the school district, especially long term? And so I think that, just putting my 2 cents, and I guess this is like discussion for the other committee members before we make our recommendation. I think that it's okay for us to send this on and get this, recommend that this letter gets written, but it has to be with the understanding that we can't really commit the district to anything until we really understand, like, it's a little bit cart before the horse, that we don't understand, like, what the financial implications are. And also, if any of these grants come with any sort of, like, long-term commitment that would obligate the district to, because I'm not sure that we could or would want to do that either. So, again, my 2 cents is, sure, let's go ahead with this, but just with everybody eyes wide open that we're very early stages and we can't we can't commit to the district to anything long-term with the information we have at this moment.
So Trish, just make sure that you send the grant to Kathy, please. Okay, I don't think Kathy has not seen the grant. We just want to make sure that the grant and what it entails is seen by Kathy first.
So Adam and Julie, I guess, do we want to recommend to the board that we're gonna make this recommendation? I'm okay with it. I'll vote yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Oh, I was going to say, I echo your comments, Mr. Smith, and think, yes, I think we need some more information, but I think we can recommend it and move forward to the board, considering that the information is forthcoming.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think there's an expectation that we have estimates, and but at this time, I'm good with the letter.
Great. Okay, so really thank you guys for coming. That was really helpful and sharing that. And now it's in the record for the community as well. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
So actually, Adam and Julie, being that that's our first action item for tomorrow, I'm actually not going to be able to attend the board meeting. Can I delegate one of you guys to give the update to the board? Don't all raise your hands at once.
I'm happy to do it, but Adam, Dr. Block, if you'd like to, you're welcome to it.
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
I can fill in where needed. How's that sound?
Great. I appreciate it, guys. Okay. So our next item is the foundation aid increase. And just by way of background, specifically what we want to talk about today was we understand that there's going to be an increase in the foundation aid for Port Washington, both due to the settlement with the governor's office and just how the calculations were done this year. So I'm actually just stepping back a little bit. I'm going to pull up the agenda here. Or it's not going to let me. Sorry, having strange computer problems today. So, stepping back, our main objective today, our agenda item that we had originally planned to talk about was the preliminary budget forecast and assumptions. This was based on the calendar that we had put together some time ago. I had spoken to Mrs. O'Hara on Friday, and we aren't quite ready to fully talk about that topic, but a lot of what the preliminary budget forecast and is going to be based on is what our revenue is going to be. So they're not quite ready with the tax cap calculation, but what we're going to be getting in terms of foundation aid is quite important. So even though this isn't exactly what was on the agenda for today originally, I think it does kind of dovetail, and we're pretty good on the process. So Mrs. O'Hara, I'm going to give you the floor to talk about that agenda item, specifically the foundation aid. And if you want to jump right into the state budget runs, if you think that those items dovetail together, feel free to skip right to that as well.
Sure, thank you. So Governor Hochul, she signed an agreement to settle a lawsuit that by 23-24, foundation aid would be completely funded. And to bring that in the first year, we would get half of our fully funded foundation aid, which is 2.3 million. So that did actually come to fruition in the state aid budgets. That's an increase for the district of 33% in foundation aid. There's also other, you have excess cost aid, you have BOCES aid. Those are also projected to increase. I do have to analyze them a little closer to make sure that we are supposed to be receiving those, because sometimes the numbers can be a little wonky. We also have textbook aid, software aid, library aid, and transportation aid, and building aid as well. So in total, according to her executive budget, we'll receive an increase of 21.2%. So typically, this is the first run, and this is the starting point for the legislative proposals of what they're going to do. So this is really the base. So I think if we use this, it's a conservative look for our budget planning. looking at this and the different, I have worked on the tax levy limit. It is preliminary, but right now I have about 2.4%. But several things go into that.
And can you remind us what it was last year?
Sure. Last year, I believe it was, I have to get back to you on that. I believe it was like 1.6, but
That's what I thought. Right. Is that right, Julie? Do you remember? It was much lower, right? It was in the ones.
I actually thought it was closer to it was in the ones, but like I thought it was maybe 1.8 or 1.9.
I was remembering 1.9. So is that roughly right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. And I can definitely get that info for you. I apologize. But you do have pilots. There's a new pilot for 101 Channel Drive that's hitting this year. So that's actually going to affect your tax cap levy as well, because that has increased. Depending on what we would like to do with the capital fund and the transfer to capital, that's also going to affect your exclusion as well. Your debt service is staying about the same, so that's not really going to affect anything. And so is your BOCES exclusion. So depending on what we decide with capital purchases, your tax levy limit could increase slightly, but I think you should be around there, like about 2.4 or 2.5.
Okay. Do you have any sense on where expenses are hitting and how inflation is impacting those?
So far, we're looking at the salary increases and everything. Most of our expenses have gone up maybe 3%, but not really too significant that we're overly concerned. We do have electricity costs are going up, but some of that is because of the construction that we've gone through. We have seen increases in our utilities and such. So
is that like the actual construction use utilities or the utilities that the buildings are using when construction is finished, when you say that?
I believe it's the actual usage once it's been finished, because we're doing all of these additions. We are seeing an increase in our,
because you're like adding air conditioning and things like in the new spaces and that kind of
Yes,
stuff. Got it.
exactly.
Okay.
So going back to foundation aid though, they're currently using federal funds to actually fund the New York State budget. So in a couple of years, that surplus of funds from the federal government may decrease. So that's why it's important as we do budget to try to look at things that we could do for kind of one-time expenses, not to rely too heavily on these funds in case there's a gap elimination adjustment like they've done in years past. So some of the things we are looking at with transportation, we're looking at the possibility of purchasing a couple of buses, because some of our fleet needs to be replaced. And if we could add an additional bus, that could help with some of the issues we're having with the runs. Also looking at like a dispatcher for the transportation department is another consideration that we're thinking, just to provide more support for transportation so that the different issues we're experiencing now with our vendor, perhaps that could be alleviated somewhat.
Yeah. So before we get like too much into specifics, can you give us a sense of where where we are in the budget process and like when the board can start to see different milestones and I guess when we can start to dig in, so to speak?
Sure. So Jessica Mack and I have been meeting with the building administrators and the various budget builders like Jim Restano. This week, we still have meetings with Dr. Hines and Dr. Shields and Dr. Mioli to speak about some of the curriculum aspects and also the staffing requirements. So that's going to take place this week. And also with transportation, I still need to firm up those numbers. So I'm hoping that by the end of this week, I can have a first draft, very rough draft. I've also been looking at all of the salary codes in all the different buildings to make sure everybody is properly budgeted for. So that way, when we roll things over, we won't have as many budget transfers because people will be in the correct places.
That would be great. Okay. Julie, I saw you had your hand raised and then down. Did you have something?
I was Just gonna ask a quick question on the buses that we're looking at in light of the executive budget that was put out by Governor Hochul and her requirement to move towards electric buses. Is that something that we would be looking at in purchasing at this point, since there is that 2035 deadline, but anything purchased after 2027, right, should be electric? Would we look forward that way, or are you still looking at non-electric?
Well, right now we're currently looking at non-electric because it is difficult to actually receive the buses. Actually, if we give them a promissory note in May after the budget passes, we may not receive the buses until November or December of the following year. So I did earlier in the year look into electric buses. They're very expensive, and you need to have a facility that can actually charge the buses. So that's something I was looking into with some of our quadrant, my colleagues that are in the area, looking into that. So that is something we would be pursuing, hopefully in the future. But right now, I don't think it's not something that could come to fruition because the buses, especially, we want to purchase the smaller buses. They don't have electric ones in the smaller ones yet. They really just have the larger buses.
Yeah. Emily, did you have a question on this subject? Because I see you're raising your hand, or more
I
big
do.
picture. Okay.
No, I actually have a question about the state runs, the aid runs. If what is the BOCES increase? Because I mean, besides the foundation aid increase that we received, which I try to always be the voice of caution. You know, it seems like we've got like you said, Kathy, we got an increase, but it really is just what was owed to us, and it's not really an increase per se, right? I mean, it is coming to us, but they owed it to us. So I just want to. But there was also an increase in our BOCES allotment. So what does that mean for us? That increase?
Sure. So that represents about $191,000 increase in the BOCES aid. But I have to look into that to see if we have actually purchased more things from BOCES, and that's why the increase, because sometimes the figures aren't correct and we really need to look at it and scrutinize it. So I'm going to be looking into that much closer. The other thing is excess cost aid that has also increased. That could be related to our more expensive students. And so I want to look into that as well.
Okay. So realistically, all these things that kind of have to be looked into, I guess, to build the basics. You're saying it's a couple of more weeks.
Yes, well, especially on the state aid runs, a lot of the organizations that we participate in, they're having webinars this week to look at the runs and make sure they're accurate, and because a lot of schools are obviously using this as their starting point.
And these are the initial runs, right? This is not the final numbers.
Correct.
So what the process continues, and generally now what the legislature comes back with their numbers, and then it becomes the negotiating. Now, I don't know this year how much more it's going to increase, because there was a significant increase in education funding in the initial budget. So in the past, it was a big negotiating back and forth, and the legislator would come back and say, we need more. So I think, we still don't know if there will be an increase this year, but this is just the first step. Right. So there may be more coming.
But from our standpoint, we also need to focus on, that's like the income side. We also need to focus on the expense side. So if we have like a big picture of what our expenses are, by the time we have all those answers, we'll kind of we'll kind of see where we are. And I guess, Kathy, is the expectation that you're hoping there won't be a gap this year based on?
No, things that I've been hearing from New York State ASBO and from NYSBA is that this will be funded for this year and at least next year. After that, it could slightly decrease. They're not 100% sure, but New York State ASBO, and I know NYSBA, this supports all of the things they've been requesting. So there may be a few legislative priorities that are attached to this. So we'll see.
Sorry, my question was different. Do you think that we're going to have like a budget gap in Port Washington based on where our income is going to fall? between the tax cap and the expected revenue and where you see the budget. That's where do you not have a sense
I'm
of that yet?
sorry. Yes, you could. Well, we'll
We
see,
could.
but I do not think you'll be piercing the tax cap, that's for sure. I'm
Oh,
sure.
certainly not. Yeah.
No.
But okay. But
Yes,
okay. Okay. So I guess that's really the bigger question is like, when do you think that we'll have that estimate of kind of where the budget is falling
I'm hoping by the end of this week.
by the end of this week?
It'll be a preliminary. There may be a gap when I present this first draft budget to you, but then we have to go back and look at it and make adjustments. So this is
Okay.
kind of going to be like everybody's wish list at first, and then we need to make sure it reflects what needs.
Okay. Great. Julie, you had a question?
Yeah, so my only question regarding this is, Kathy, you mentioned that depending on what the board decides regarding transfer to capital and capital funds, right? That's something that also affects our levy limit potentially. So when do you foresee, do you want to first get the budget preliminarily set up? Do you want us to start any conversations yet on capital reserve? I know past boards have agreed that we're putting some money, or we're putting monies in for roof repairs, but I think that also leaves us with about $600,000, right, to put something else for capital repairs in, or capital, or transfer to capital in as well for this year, because the roofs were like 1.4 or 1.6, somewhere in there, and we have a 2 million amount that we've committed thus far. When do you see those conversations starting? Do you have information now? Is that something you were talking about today?
Yes, that was a conversation I was hoping we were going to have today, actually, because we have our 5-year facility plan. I ranked it, Jim and I looked at it and prioritized it. So I was hoping we could look at that. If you'd like me to share my screen.
That's a perfect segue into
Yes.
our next 2 topics on the agenda. Well, actually 3 topics are the capital reserve, the 5-year facility plan, and the elementary playgrounds, and of course transportation. So I feel like all of those, and again, all of those we haven't actually brought to the board with our formal recommendations, but I've been keeping them on this, I guess, tickler list as things that we've talked about here. So I'll give you the floor.
Can you all see my screen?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'm trying to find my 5-year capital plan. Hold on. Now, can you see it?
We can
Okay.
now.
Okay, so this is the list of non-ventilation items. The first one is the roof, and this is the priority for the next couple of years, is to finish. You'll see below the 1.5, there's still a portion of Daly and Salem that would need to be done. And then the high school roof, we may have to split that up because we currently have like a $2 million transfer to capital. But if you look up above for the 3 Daly, Weber, and Manor Haven, it's about almost 1.4 million. Then the other priority was the high school running track, resurfacing it, and also exterior masonry reconstruction at Daly. So if you look at that, if you wanted to stay at the actual same transfer to capital, you would have another, I believe, 164,000 still left to spend on unanticipated capital projects. If there were more things that you wanted, we would have to actually increase that transfer to capital. So that's
And what's the implication of that?
That really makes your tax levy increase because it's excluded whenever there's capital expenditures.
Right. But they're not necessarily like permanent compounding increases, right? Those are 1-year increases
Right,
that
they're
don't.
one shots, yes,
Right.
unless it's debt service, that would continue until the debt falls off. But this would be funding it right out of our fund.
Got it.
So
Hey, Emily and Julie, has anybody ever looked at, if you just out of curiosity, when you raised the transfer to capital, like kind of for every 100,000, kind of like what the average impact per house is in the district? Like,
I don't remember.
I don't know that they've looked at it
Yeah.
just as by raising the transfer to capital, because there are so many other factors that
Right.
affect, the increase per household, that they've only looked at the overall increase per household, not broken it out by raising the transfer to capital.
so do you have any sense of like is there like any formula, like every $100,000 raise to our budget is this much per? No, it's easy to figure out. I guess we just have to know how
Kathy can explain this better probably, but my understanding from past is the recent changes in the Nassau County property tax laws took away the simplicity also
Got it.
of being able to say every 100,000, you can say it's going to be an extra $100. I'm just using that as rough numbers, right? Making that up. But that's been my understanding, and that those changes were made recently in Nassau County, but she can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, that's pretty accurate. I can project it if everything stayed status quo. If your assessed value of your house didn't increase, if our assessed value stayed the same. So I can provide guidance as we get closer to knowing what all of that's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I would just be curious how many homes are taxed in our district, and then just divide it, you know what I mean, and just kind of make it apples to, you know what I mean, just to be curious, and just so that we knew like what the implication is on somebody's tax bill, if we were to do that, kind of on the average, because obviously it's going to be very different if you're in a $8 million house versus if you're in a $500,000 house.
Right.
But Emily, go ahead.
Actually, my question is for Kathy. So Kathy, is it your recommendation though that we stay at the same 2 million that we've done in the past as far as transfer to capital? So what you're showing us is in priority 1, cover the, fall within that. And then you said that it would leave us with some, emergency type of transfer to capital funds if we needed. So is that what your recommendation would be?
Yes, that's mine and Jim's recommendation, unless there was something really specific that you all felt needed to be addressed currently. But the district has been steadily increasing the transfer to capital. You used to be at 1.4 million. Prior to that, you were at 880,000. So I think that this is a good amount of money to maintain the facilities. But if you saw that there was something more pressing, which Jim, if you'd like to hop in, we've looked at this, we've looked at everything with our architect as well. And we think that with this, it would be sufficient.
I stated in the past couple of meetings that if we stay on this path, with an increase would definitely be
Tim would like
there. But nobody's pushing for that. But if we stay on this trajectory, we'll be in very good shape in the next 5 years.
What kind of increase, when you say that, like, what do you think is missing?
No, I'm not
that you
saying.
want to- Oh,
No, what I meant is it would be nice to get an increase, but Kathy and I are not asking for that. What I'm saying is to keep it status quo would be a very, very good plan going forward.
got it. Yeah, because it looks like a lot of your items that are past priority 1 are massive numbers, so it's not like you could just squeeze those in. Is that? And I'm seeing something like high school roof replacement is $5 million.
If we were to go that, and I sort of touched on that briefly during the last meeting, there was a year in the presentation that I made where it does jump tremendously, and I believe that is the year with the high school roof. If anything, that would be the year to maybe jump and make an additional, but just for that year.
Just for that year.
And then go back to the 2 million again and maintain everything that we need to. Again, that's a big chunk, and but it's needed, and it's a long time coming. And I thank the board tremendously for this opportunity to have this kind of money in the budget, because of all these years we worked with significantly less.
Jim, are these numbers adjusted for today's market?
Today's market that's a trick question.
I know.
Today's market changes, seems like every 5 minutes. So it's a difficult question to answer, but
it doesn't seem to ever get lower though, right?
no. unfortunately, and construction materials keep going up and becoming a problem that
So
is.
let me rephrase the question. What's the basis of these numbers, or how old are these numbers?
These numbers are about a year old, and any other time in history they would be pretty accurate. But being that we're in the position we're in now with supplies, it's difficult to say how accurate they are.
Okay.
But it's not something. In other words, just we can't be negative on that. We got to. Personally, I just feel we got to keep going and whatever we can do.
Well, I just want to ask on these priority 1 items, like if the board were to, keep the number where it is, I just want to make sure that you guys kind of refresh those and build in a little contingency so that if we say, hey, you're doing this, this, and this next year, I just want to make sure that you're in a position to do that. Like, we don't want to be greedy, but we want to make sure that you can actually complete the work.
I guess we'll have to go back to the architect to make sure, because there are a lot of things have changed since these numbers, a lot of things material wise.
Right.
The
Can we get indicative bids from vendors?
Adam, isn't there already a built-in? Because it's not 2 million, this total,
Right,
correct?
we have we have
there's a-
160,000 as contingency,
Yeah,
so.
but that's not very much on a $1.8 million, project from a year. I'm just, the price could be up 50% or 40%, so the 167,000, it doesn't do anything, and it leaves you with no wiggle room. So I just think that it would be prudent to make sure before we finalize the budget, it doesn't have to be today, but before we finalize the budget and go to the taxpayers, I think it would be worthwhile to refresh those numbers.
Agreed.
Yeah. Julie, go ahead.
I don't disagree that we should have the most accurate numbers. I'm just curious, how much of a contingency are we allowed to have in our transfer to capital? Right? Because you have to have it designated for something. Are you allowed to have a contingency built in there, or do you have to have it earmarked for something specific?
No, you can have a contingency in there. And that's why in the capital exclusion for the tax cap, we have to kind of figure out if this isn't all going to be actually spent next year. Like, say the roof, there's just an example. If we only spend 700,000 next year, or we're not able to actually do the roof next year, we have to wait another year. I wouldn't include that 1.4 in the capital exclusion.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Okay. So just so that I understand here from a process standpoint, we don't actually have, and Emily, I guess I'm going to ask you this question. We don't need to bring this to the board from this committee because this will all be in what's presented at the upcoming budget work sessions. Is that accurate?
Correct.
We're just kind of
yes. I think
this is where we're discussing it.
Yeah. So there's no act. Remember, we're going to try to just do action items needed, right?
Right.
This is all available for any board member, and it will be obviously included in Kathy's presentation, budget meetings, which we do start on the February 1st with that, right, Kathy? So we have our first budget presentation on the 1st
Next week.
Yeah. So I think we're okay.
Okay. So I want to go back to the playground conversation, because the committee had actually recommended that we bring it back to the board, and I don't think that we ever did, because Mr. Restano had given us that presentation about kind of like using that base year and the minimum standard, and kind of giving us the concept of a path to bring it. But I think we never actually got like what would be the dollar amount that we would have to commit on an annual basis. And maybe we did, but I don't remember because there's been so much. And that did we see that, Jim? Like, what would be and I know, Kathy, you had gotten back to us that we could in fact use transfer to capital if that was something that the board wanted to do. So I just wanted to kind of close the loop on that and bring that to the board, because I know a lot of the other board members had also expressed that was a priority, or at least an item of interest. Again, this committee had voted to bring it back to the board, and we never did.
I believe there were numbers that I gave for the first. I think I sort of if I remember, again, I don't have it in front of me, but we
Yeah.
did something
Could I
else.
ask you to just to email me that, because I just want
Yeah.
to bring
I-
that conversation back to the board, because that might be something that could potentially be added to that like annual capital transfer to capital program over a multi-year period to
Okay.
like bring the playgrounds up to spec, I guess.
I will get that to you.
Okay. And again, you may have sent it. I just I know it was like over a month ago. I just don't remember. I apologize. Okay. Julie, you had your hand raised or no?
So I guess where I was under the impression that at the last board meeting that this committee felt that while we were excited about the idea and the financials that were presented on the playground, that maybe wasn't a priority for this year. So then you're looking for forecasting for years after this year?
Well, that's
correct?
what you had said, right? The
Okay,
committee
you're right.
voted
Oh,
that we were, yeah.
you're
So
right, I'm sorry.
the committee voted to bring it to the board, and you had said you would vote for that, but your recommendation was that you didn't think it was a priority for this year.
Oh, sorry. I thought Dr. Block had agreed. I apologize then for my mismemory.
No, I actually, if I recall, Dr. Block had said.
Either way.
But
I'm sorry.
But the bottom line was we were supposed to bring it to the board.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to bring this to the board to ask them if they want to make playgrounds a priority in our budgeting. Okay.
Exactly.
And
as part of transfer to
capital. So that means then that we would take something out of transfer to capital that was
or add
to increase transfer to capital above the $2 million mark.
Yeah. And it might be a $100,000 or $200,000 number a year. It might be 50. I don't know. Like we just need to ask the board. I think what we had said was we needed to ask the board if it was a priority before we put the staff to kind of make them crazy about something that we weren't going to. And
can I just add on? I'm sorry. Can I just suggest another process, because we still don't have the exact numbers. I think you just gave another to do basically to Kathy about finding the transfer to capital number being accurate with regards to the roof costs, right? So they have to go back to the architect and figure out what the roof. So I'm suggesting that we wait and see. So see that if the roof costs are $2 million hypothetically, and you could have it in one conversation about how much do we want to put in transfer to capital and present to the board. Ultimately, we have $2 million that we have to put in for roofs. I'm coming up with numbers, and $100,000 the committee would like to put in, or suggesting, or Kathy is suggesting, goes towards playgrounds. Hypothetically, board, are you okay with 2.1 as transfer to capital today? So I'm just saying, instead of having
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that the board in general agreed that was something that they wanted to do. Whether it was this year or next.
Bigger question. I think the bigger question though is, what is the transfer to capital number, right? So if the roof costs go up to 2.5, let's say Jim goes back to the architect and they say, you know what, question,
right? Yeah.
Right. So I think let's wait is what I'm saying. I'm just trying to save us some process time and see if we can have an overall discussion about what is going into transfer to capital and what the committee recommends goes into transfer to capital. Right. And does the board agree that these things go into transfer to capital?
Okay. So and I think that the rest of the board is here, so they're listening. So I'm sure that if anybody disagrees, they can chime in. But I think that makes sense as long as it doesn't get forgotten. Mr. Restano, go ahead.
Yeah, it's all right if I make a suggestion. I know we talked about excess on the on capital if we don't spend the whole amount of numbers do come in under budget, which it happens sometimes. I can't promise it, but could we set something up where any excess goes into a playground fund? And then
or maybe not a fund, but maybe just if there's any excess that we would use it, since we have to. Kathy said we don't have to earmark it, but I think the other question is, do we want to? Are you proposing like a capital reserve? For playgrounds? Well,
it is something that's going to keep recurring over the years. A reserve wouldn't hurt, but if we were to in lieu of a reserve, if you were to take any funds that are left over from capital in a year and earmark it for playgrounds to do something with a playground. That's all I'm saying. Again, it's not a guarantee. That's the only.
Right. Yeah, it crossed my mind actually that was an option. I would just be curious, like how often that actually happens, like how realistic it is that it would, if that's especially in this kind of like inflationary environment, if there's ever going to be leftover.
What I mean, I don't want it to be sound, I mean, in addition to what we do budget. So.
Got it.
Rather than, that's just an idea.
Yeah. So I want to jump from that, if it's okay, right into this capital reserve conversation. And I apologize, like I'm still a little bit, I don't quite have my head wrapped around where we stand on this and kind of what the next step is. Julie, I guess my question is like, we're a little bit like kind of cart before the horse to move any further on this? Is that?
Well, I think if this committee, what we heard talk at the budget meeting or at the board meeting is that the board was okay if this committee discussed what we would set and establish a capital reserve for with the parameters. So if this committee feels that we want to discuss establishing a capital reserve, then we would solidify what the recommendation would be on what the capital reserve would be established for, the dollar amount and the duration, right? And then we would bring that back to the board, and that way Ms. O'Hara would know when budgeting if she has to include a capital reserve into her equations as well.
Right. But I guess my question is, though, conceptually, like we're a little bit like cart before the horse to be able to start that conversation right now.
Well,
right? 'Cause we don't. Or do you think we can?
No,
Mrs.
I'm
Hart?
sorry.
I don't think it is. I actually,
Okay.
think, well, I mean, Emily, you can chime in, but I do think in this situation, is if this is something we feel we would like to do, is establish some sort of long-term fund that is even just as basic as a capital reserve for maintenance and repairs. And it's going to have a not to exceed amount of X, which remember, excess is going in there, and the board can decide what amount of excess is going into that at the end of the year. And if there is no excess, then no excess goes in there. I guess I don't even see what the downside is, other than the fact
having the
that
option.
Yes, I just think it's nice to have the option. So I guess, Kathy, you can tell us the downsides of it, or
no, I was just going to kind of in support. We have our 5-year plan, and we had a lot of items that we wanted to do electrical service upgrades at the different buildings. And we also wanted to look at ventilation, and we wanted to look at AC. So if we just looked at the electrical service upgrades, that's 3.6 million. You could go to the voters and say, we would like to have a capital reserve for 4 million to go towards electrical service upgrades, so that excess would fund this. Then you could have another capital reserve in a future year that looks at ventilation. Ventilation is like 6.9 million, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, 6.1. So that's the way you would actually set it up. You would have a purpose for it. And then when you wanted to spend it, you could spend it. And you could take, if you want to do the high school 1 year, you could take 2 million out of that 6.1 you put aside. You don't have to wait until you get 6 million to do it all at once.
But realistically, where are we getting these types of dollars from to fund these reserves?
So it would be from excess. If we're budgeting contingencies for like special needs students or for homeless students or different things that we might have, if we don't have those expenses, you would be able to take that and put it into a reserve. Or if you have retirements during the year and you have breakage from salary, you could take that money and put it in there.
Okay. Historically, does anyone have a sense historically, and then I know Adam and Emily both want to go. Does anyone have a sense of like historically what kind of dollar amounts we've had in excess?
That was my question.
Very
that I was going to ask Kathy.
Okay.
I was very surprised at how close the budget has been. And that's why the district has been trying to build up its reserves. So with this increase in foundation aid, this is the perfect time to
do it.
To look at what the needs are, but also to take some of, if there's excess, to place it into reserves, to build up your reserves. Because when that funding does stop from the state, when they don't have enough money, we're going to call on our reserves to not have such a big impact on the district's taxpayers.
So Kathy, that's my question. So in the past, when we've had to we've had issues with the tax cap, and we have not wanted to obviously go over the tax cap, and we've been able to take money out of reserves and transfer it back. Would we be able to use this capital reserves and put it back in if we needed it, or would it have to be just for that?
It would have to be for the designated purpose. So if it was for ventilation.
So we have
unless
to be
you went
careful
up.
about funding all of the reserves and not only funding this reserve, right? It's still
We
going to be a
do
balancing
fund-
act.
Yeah,
And that's something the board could decide at the end of
Yeah.
the year when there's surplus. I would come to you and say, I recommend doing this based on the status of the reserve and the liabilities associated with those reserves. And we could say, okay, let's put only 100,000 into this capital repair reserve or capital reserve this year.
So as I understand it, the question for the board this year is, do we want to establish a capital reserve? And we do need to have this conversation with the board earlier than later, because it does have to get put on the ballot and we need to make sure that everybody understands. And so it's just a question of, do we want to establish this reserve? And if so, we would get it on the ballot. It does not mean that there's that.
We have to establish what
Right.
the reserve will
What
be
it- what the
which I
reserve-
think is the
Right.
harder. I think it's the harder.
Right, but I
question.
think I'm hearing Kathy, and I guess so my question to you, Kathy, is it your recommendation? I guess I'm asking for your recommendation, and Dr. Heinz, I see you're on now too, and your recommendation that we establish a capital reserve and we establish it for a certain amount and for a certain purpose is what I've been hearing you. And I see, Dr. Heinz, you wrote in the chat, what is the downside? I don't know what the downside is of establishing one. So I guess that's the question that everybody would have.
Correct.
Kathy,
I don't
yeah.
see a downside to it. And
No,
I know
that was a
there's lot of
rhetorical
talk.
question, by the way. It was really, there is no downside. I think if we're really focused on what we're setting the money aside for, it's incredibly beneficial. But to Adam Smith's really great point is, well, how much money do we have to fund this year after year? Like, where is that money coming from? And as Kathy said before, we are always incredibly tight at the end of the year. I mean, it's really unbelievable. I've never seen budgets so tight. So that's why it's important when we know when the threshold is as far as the levy. The real question is, how close will the district come to that point? Clearly not exceeding the levy and not, piercing it, but how close will we get? Because that's what helps us year after year, the closer we get, in my estimation.
So to answer your rhetorical question, Dr. Heinz, about the downside, because I think it's actually kind of that question is kind of the whole question that we have to decide. That's right. What is the downside? So I guess the point is, if we set up a reserve, there's really no downside. But if we can't fund it, is there kind of some sort of like a PR downside, or like an expectation that the voters voted for this this fund for, let's say we go out and we say we're doing a fund for electrical upgrades to support future ventilation projects, and then people start asking, well, you set up this fund where people aren't going to understand all of these nuances of how this fund works. The question is like, are we setting ourselves up for like some sort of negative PR situation if we create this fund and then year after year there's nothing happening, right? Just hypothetically, that would be my concern. Otherwise, or if we start sucking away money and we get halfway there and the money just sits year after year after year. The only downside is if we don't think realistically we're going to be able to use it, or that's a reliable source of funding this project. Is it a distraction from trying to properly fund the project? That's my rhetorical question, I guess. Okay, Dr. Heinz and then Julie.
Yeah, sorry, Julie. This is a really important, and it's a great conversation. Some of the things that Kathy brought up before is, whether it's the roofs, whether it's electrical, we're going to have to pay for them anyway, right? So I think what I'm thinking about is, if we are making these things a priority, it sounds like, and please, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the benefits of not going into the general fund to pay for this, but setting money aside, let's say we, over the next 2 years, build up those reserves, and then we focus on purchasing whatever it is we need to do. It sounds like that. And again, in the places I've been before, capital, using that in a very thoughtful and deliberate way where the community understands what we're setting those monies aside for, I think is a PR check if we do it the right way. I think, again, it comes down to, as far as funding these potential reserves, or this one in particular, is how do we do this for next year's budget to make sure we have enough contingencies to then potentially roll over. And not just, I'm not talking about padding the budget, but, as Kathy said before, special education, transportation, a lot of different places where generally, we have to think worst case scenario to make sure that we're budgeting it properly. And then we could look to do that. And a great thing too, I know we were talking about this before, which I'm thankful for, is playgrounds. I mean, just, budgeting for capital reserves in that way too, I think is incredibly helpful. So points well taken. I think if we do it the right way, I think it'll be a win-win for the community and for the board.
Great. Julie, and then Adam, please.
I was just going to ask Kathy, I know you threw the suggestion out there of capital reserves for electrical service upgrades and then the other for ventilation. In looking at our numbers now and forecasting for our future, is that your recommendation of the type of capital reserve that we should look to establish this year? And in light of the conversation and the PR and all of that, or do you have a different recommendation of something that we would look at?
No, my recommendation would be the ventilation and the electrical service upgrades. Mr. Restano and I discussed it, and those are really the starting places to actually look, even to consider AC, which maybe down the road that would be something, but we definitely have ventilation issues at all of the, not issues, but things that could be improved and just make things run more efficiently.
So can I also ask the question that if you establish a capital reserve fund for electrical service upgrades, isn't it possible, whether we move towards ventilation or not, right? With ventilation being our ultimate goal, if we don't move towards ventilation, we can still utilize the capital reserve money on any electrical upgrades that may be needed for the future. And the way the world works, there will probably be electrical upgrades needed, correct?
Yes, we definitely need electrical upgrades, because we do have air conditioning at different schools, and that's really placing a large strain on the electrical system.
So from a PR standpoint, there is even a benefit, even if we can't execute on the larger scale immediately, and this is a which it could be a decade situation, right? There are small little wins that keep us advancing just baby step wise with having a capital reserve. And that kind of, works to your PR campaign, Adam, so to speak, right? It's not like we're just putting it away and in 10 years.
We just have to be very clear when I know that the board and the district can't market it per se, but we are going to be speaking about it to people, and presumably there will be people who are out there pushing for it. And I think that we have to make sure that the community fully understands what we're talking about. That's so I guess if we decide to do it, as long as they understand, to Dr. Hines' point, we just have to be careful that we do it correctly and thoughtfully.
Right.
Dr. Black, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this is the moment. We have money coming from the state that we didn't expect to, so we expect to be able to at least fund it partially this year. We have people that are focused on ventilation because of COVID. And so therefore, I think we will be able to successfully win the vote and get it started. It's not something the district has done before. And so we have to, be a little cautious, but I think this is the right moment to do it.
Okay. I agree. So, Julie, if you agree, I think we could make that recommendation to the board.
What's the
but we need to make sure we understand if it is electrical and what the dollar amount is. Like, I would be in favor of, I think Kathy and Dr. Hines should make that recommendation to us. And then we would have that to bring to the board. But conceptually, I think it's worth their time to do that and make that recommendation to us.
Can we ask that Kathy maybe include that in her preliminary budget discussions, budget presentations that she does this way? The entire board could, okay.
Perfect. Okay. So remaining on the agenda, we have transportation, which I don't we already talked about what some of your plans are, Kathy, with the buses and whatnot. So I think we'll skip that one. And then the last item on the agenda is, did you think any more, Kathy, about the use of the after school programs and if we should do an RFP?
Sure. I did speak with the building administrators about that. And they had said, as long as there's support, like we have two programs now, as you know, one
Right.
at Daly, one at Guggenheim. It would be beneficial to go out for an RFP to look at it. Certain things would have to be written into the RFP about, control of the students, where they're located. But I kind of wanted to get a sense from this group. Is it more like childcare, or does it have to be an enrichment program? Because I was looking at it as more as childcare.
Well, I think we could see what my personal opinion is, I think we could see what the RFP produces. My guess is, like, most of the programs I know that both of the programs that are in the two buildings now, Guggenheim and Delhi, are a base of childcare, and they offer add-on enrichment. And I don't necessarily, personally, I wouldn't think that we need to get in the weeds on that. I think the market will determine that. But I would say that the RFP should be, and I guess really the question for us is, and I don't know if this is a board question or something that the administration can do without the board, because it's not like micromanaging, but the question is like, to what extent do we care? Right?
Well,
how do we determine what's best for the district? That's my question.
And I would be putting the RFP together with the administration of the buildings and stuff. So I'll see what they think. I just wasn't sure what you all felt.
My opinion is we should put out the RFP and see what they're offering. And then I guess the question is, though, is how are you going to judge the RFP? Like, how would you determine what's best? That's really the question.
Yeah, I would have a rubric.
Yeah. So Adam, then Julie, and then Emily.
So I think it's childcare with ideally, like, the primary goal is additional childcare after school. So, and if there are classes, that's great. That is, sort of adds to what the organization that's offering this can offer. But I don't see it as like, a chess program that meets every Thursday at 5 o'clock, and people will pick up their kids or get their kids and then drop them off at 5 o'clock. This is like, you stay at school. And like, if you want to stay at school, then, and there are classes that are offered to, so that the kids aren't just like either playing basketball or, playing in the schoolyard and doing homework, like, then that adds to the appeal of the program. But to me, this is childcare based at each individual school.
Okay, I guess my only question is in addition to these conversations, what happens to our programs that are currently running after school and utilizing our buildings? When the Hearts program runs all of their after school programs, when HSAs and PTA programs run all of their after school programs and events, are they going to be competing in this regard with all of these organizations? Or have we even looked at all of this? I didn't realize we were ready to go to RFP. I guess I'm a little behind in this conversation. Last conversation at the last budget meeting, we were just discussing roster fees and whether or not roster fees were being charged or not charged. And now we're drafting an RFP. And I guess I didn't realize we were making that leap at this point. And I'm happy to discuss it. I just, again, I'm a little behind, so I apologize for my questions. I just want to see what we're trying to achieve. And is this the direction that the district is asking? Is the district asking the board, we'd like to increase revenue and provide these childcare services, and we have the partnership and the facilities to do that, and this is the direction we'd like to go? Is that how this is being presented?
Well, I think Kathy had said, we had brought this up, Julie, but I had gotten the sense from Kathy, and Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, that this was something that you thought was a good idea, and you had made the comment that your other district, it was something that you had thought was done in a very positive way. If I recall, you had made the comment that it was something that would help the families, and you were all for it. So Kathy, do you want to maybe, I guess, repeat that? I don't remember if you told me that in the board if that was in a conversation we'd have when we were talking about the agenda or not. But I think it's a worthwhile thing to repeat. Yeah.
Yes, I do think it would be beneficial, but also I think it is a discussion for the board to decide, not for me. But I think it's something, of course, that would benefit the community, but that's a discussion for all of you.
Emily, you're up.
Yeah, I just actually want us to go back a couple of steps because I'm also very confused. We talked about, the last discussion was about the facilities usage fees versus the roster fees. And there was a discussion, I guess, Dr. Block and you had had a meeting with someone and you were discussing bringing that. So my question is this, what is the goal? Is the goal to increase our income? Is because as a board of education, we have to look out for the interests of the district. As a board of education, it is not our job, I believe, to be worried about people's childcare services. I know at Dr. Block, this was a big hot button of yours when you were running. And so I just want to.
That's an opinion, not an objective statement, but yes.
But it was his objective as a.
No, I'm saying it's your opinion that it's not for the Board of Ed to think about people's childcare. Not as an opinion. Exactly
correct. And that's what I'm saying. It's my opinion. That's our job. So we have a bigger question, I think, that we need to address. But I do believe that as a Board of Education, we have to be concerned about the finances of the district. And so if this is a way that we can help the finances of the district and at the same time alleviate perhaps a burden on our parents for what they do after school, I think that is something definitely worth discussing big picture wise, right? So I'm just trying to say we have to be looking out for the finances of the district. Would this cost us money? Meaning, would we be losing other programs and would there be a detriment? I don't know why we as a district wouldn't be looking at something. Kathy asked whether or not it would be pure childcare, would it be educational enrichment? I don't know why we wouldn't be doing enrichment. I mean, this is our job as a district.
I think, Emily,
right?
That's the whole point, right? Is we're trying to discuss this now. So
I think that we should. But you need to give a direction because it does need to go to the general board. Right, but it has to go to the general board is my point to you.
Right. So I think that's the point of, I think that's what we're trying to discuss is we're trying to frame the question. And if we can discuss it, I think that would be beneficial. So let's discuss it. I just want to note we have 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to ask if everyone in the community who's intending to have comments could raise your hand now so we can just kind of have a sense of how much time we need to allocate for that. Because we only have this. We have 3 people raising their hand. How's everyone doing on time? Do we have to hard stop at 10 o'clock? So I think what I'm gonna do is let's have this conversation. Let's finish this conversation, and then any administrators who have to jump off can, and we'll wait and give as much time as we need to community comments if that's okay. Okay, so go ahead, Adam, Dr. Block.
Yeah, so I think this is an incredibly important thing that we can do. I intend it to be either a revenue raiser or at a very minimum budget neutral. I think there is absolutely appetite in the community that people would go to their home schools much more frequently than they will go to Guggenheim. I can tell you personally that I would absolutely do that. I think it is also an additional enrichment opportunity. I think there are a bunch of kids out there who after school, because their parents work full time, they don't have the opportunities to go to enrichment activities where you have to get driven to those enrichment activities. And if those can be offered to them inside of the school, I think this is a very clear opportunity for multiple wins in terms of equity, in terms of revenue, and in terms of childcare. So I am all for, we should be pushing this forward. We should be pushing this forward for fall 2022.
Yeah, I fully agree with Dr. Block. And I will say that I'm using one of the programs at one of the schools, and I think it's a godsend. And I think that, I know that, kids who are bused into the program are, it's adding 20, 30 minutes plus to those kids' days. And I would imagine that there'll be much higher utilization if it's offered, more at the home schools. So to the extent that it's at a minimum budget neutral for the district and not competitive with other programs, And not, although from what I understand, there is fairly limited other programs happening even before COVID in the evenings at elementary schools. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they seem to have been few and far between, generally speaking. I'm fully in support of some type of RFP to do that. Julie and then Adam again.
I'm also I can be in support. I just wanted to have more information. So as long as we know that we're going to be budget neutral, that we or it's a revenue raiser, I'm fine with providing the additional support. It seems as if, from what I'm hearing, looking at the childcare with the option of enrichment, if you were going to mirror what's currently in existence and just offering it at the other schools where it's not physically offered, is kind of the direction to go. So as long as that model has been working for us, and if we can see that we can just mirror that model, and I don't think it has been a revenue, I think it's been a revenue raiser or at least budget neutral. I think that would be the direction we could go. I'm not seeing any detriments. I just wanted to ask the question, do we have any detriments to this program at all?
I think that it's important to note, and Kathy may have told me this when we spoke on the phone, that there was concern from the principals about how the school is left, how that it's critical, and this has to be, if we do an RFP, written in that, and whether they're paying or they're doing it themselves, they have to return the school to how they found it, right? And I don't know how I think Dr. Hines is raising a hand. I bet he wants to speak about that, but I think that's critical, that we can't add a burden onto our schools.
Yeah, so we had a really good conversation. Kathy, brought it up in our all-min meeting. And I think Dr. Block may have said this, there's an equity. We want to make sure if we do it, it's for all the elementary schools. That's the first thing, right? The second thing is a space concern. There's a big difference between just, for lack of a better word, having students stay in the cafeteria and or having access to other parts of the building. And that's where it started to get a little more nuanced that we would have to look at, because in some of our buildings, we have some of our sports teams coming in throughout the year using our gyms and all those other things. So these are the things that we would have to work out. But I believe all in all, the principals were behind this idea. They just wanted to make sure it was in an equitable way. And as you said, Mr. Smith, making sure that everything is cleaned up. And so when the kids come to school the following morning, everything was okay.
Great. I don't think so. I guess the action item is, and I think I kind of heard it, that Julie said she would support it. And where Adam and I stand is that from our standpoint, from this committee, we would be prepared to make a recommendation to the board that the administration kind of runs with this. And I don't think we necessarily need to be in the weeds on this, but is that fair? Yeah. See, Julie's nodding her head. Adam as well. So we'll Julie, can you present this to the board as well tonight or tomorrow night? You're muted, but I see you nodding your head.
You gave it to Adam, but yes, I'll have it.
Oh, sorry, Adam. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Help with it.
I'm sitting here taking notes.
Great.
I can do it.
Okay, awesome. And then great. Emily, you're okay with that? Yeah. Okay. So really appreciate it. We just hit 10 o'clock, so any administrators who have to move on, feel free to do so. And I'm going to go to community comments now. Ms. Alvarez, you're unmuted, or you can unmute yourself.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
We can.
I just had a request or a question as far as the capital reserve goes and what it ends up being that the funds will be used towards in the future. I understand that the board is going to discuss it, decide everything. And I just asked if there's a way, once it is all said and done, before it goes to the community to vote on, that there is some sort of presentation, if it is the electrical needs, whatever it is that the needs are for the ventilation, that it's presented at one of these either subcommittees or the next board, one of the board meetings, so the community can actually understand what the reserve will be used for. I get the concept, but I think it's also important that we also understand what the funds are for. instead of just saying these are the two items. You know, there's a lot that goes into ventilation that's a concern now. There was a lot of money used already towards ventilation, so I think it would just be important. I also just I'm also very confused on what the discussion was for the after school programs. It kind of goes together in the fact that if there's this extra reserve, right, that we're discussing, and then board members are saying, Miss Bays, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but that you don't care about communities' need for aftercare programs. I also utilize one of those aftercare programs, and it is a godsend for me, as one of the board members mentioned. And I think that I ask that just board members be very cautious of the words they use in budget meetings when it's discussing things that certain taxpayers really rely on to be part of this community. So I just ask that everything be considerate, that there are people from the community on these Zooms. Thank you.
Ms. Alvarez, I'm just going to address you personally. I'm sorry if it came off that I didn't care. That's not what I was saying. I was saying that the Board of Education's responsibility is to the district's funding. That's our job as board members. Whether we care, you know, our individual feelings are very different. That's what I was addressing, but I thank you for pointing that out.
Great. And Ms. Alvarez, we appreciate that feedback. And, definitely, I think we certainly plan to, once this is fully baked, present it to the community. And I believe that we'll also be presenting this with the budget to the HSAs. And there'll be lots of opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, I'm going to go to Ms. Schreiber. Ms. Schreiber, you can unmute yourself.
Did it work?
We can hear you now. You're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. So my question is regarding the playgrounds. So I really appreciate the large discussion regarding playgrounds and all of the thought that you're all putting into it. Seeing as there are 5 elementary schools with varying playgrounds that are in various needs of repair, and the extra funding that's coming in this school year, how can funds be distributed equitably to the different schools to ensure that all schools have safe and age-appropriate playgrounds? When the pieces of playground equipment are deemed unsafe during the school year and are then removed, how can finances be distributed from the district in a timely manner to replace what was removed, but also to replace it with something that was similar to what was there in both size and cost?
So, Ms. Schreiber, we actually had a very detailed presentation from Mr. Restano several meetings ago, kind of answering that exact question. And the answer is we're working towards trying to answer those questions. But thank you for the question. Ms. Milwani.
Thank you. Jessica Milwani, Manor Haven Parent and Port Washington Parents Council. I'm very grateful that the conversation about aftercare and enrichment is continuing and continuing quickly. I was also very glad to hear, because my question was really around stakeholder engagement. So thank you, Dr. Hines, for letting everybody know that the building admins have been engaged. In the past, when this conversation has come up, even just within a particular building, the concerns among the faculty and staff around the disruption to the building have really come through loud and clear. So I think it would behoove the board to consider the admins and the staff and also our teachers' perspective in crafting that RFP. I would also encourage the board to seek community input, not necessarily to simply go out to RFP and then look at sort of as what we get back as you get what you get and you don't get upset. I think we can create some very clear parameters around what we as a district, as a community want out of this program. And I would just encourage the board and the district's administration to consider that in the planning process. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Do we have any other community members? It looks like not. So I thank everybody for staying over. It's 10:07. So everybody have a great day.